with painful emotions, the thing to really keep in mind and understand is that pain is not a bug in the system, it's a feature. Pain is an adaptive mechanism within evolution. And just like, the emotional gym equivalent and the physical gym, the last few reps are the most painful and the toughest. They also create the most growth. Pain creates growth. Pain forces adaptation and evolution. And the species that survived and really thrived and climbed up the hierarchy in nature are those that could adapt best to painful emotions, to stress, that could deal with their fear and survival terror and anxiety in the most efficient way. Those are the species that survive. And we spoke about how emotional intelligence correlated with success. It's the humans that can handle their pain most efficiently that climb up the hierarchy as well. So, practitionership, as we've been saying all week, is not leaning away from the pain, it's leaning into it. Not in a, of course, masochistic way. This isn't like seeking out pain and trying to inflict pain on yourself constantly and sort of getting this distorted pleasure out of it. That's not what I mean at all. It's just leaning into the discomfort, not away. We're all clear on that? And I should also say, as I think I've said this week, I think I said it yesterday, the goal isn't to feel better. The goal is to get better at feeling.
It's a bar.
The goal isn't to get better, it's to get better at feeling, meaning the bosses are more challenging at each level, and as you ascend, there's new capacity and there's also new challenge. And as you conquer each challenge, you have new capacity, which means there's going to be even greater challenge. The universe is a gym where you need to lift the weight that you are capable of lifting. Cool? So finally, on the extreme end of the on the pain spectrum, we have what's referred to as trauma, which are emotions that are so frozen and so locked in the unconscious that they've essentially, it's not that the energy isn't moving at all, but it's like a complete log jam in the system. And when they're activated, because that energy is so potent, it kind of explodes. You see people that, otherwise would be very, they'd be okay in a situation, they get triggered, and it's almost like they turn into somebody else. The trauma takes over their system. The reason for that is in nature, you could kind of see the trauma response as like nature's numbing agent. Yeah, when an animal is getting chased by a lion and gets caught and the lion's eating into it, the trauma response basically sends our it's like a computer crash for our nervous system. It sends it into shutdown, which means we don't have to feel all of the pain of the lion ripping into us. So it's a good thing, but if we're, when we're a kid and our parents yell at us and we don't understand why, and it's just so much energy that it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We don't have the efficiency in our nervous system and our emotional body to allow that energy to pass, so we lock it up in our body. And basically we freeze. Those frozen emotions get trapped in our system and cause us to act out in various ways in the rest of our lives. And trauma, it should be said, is kind of a human condition. So some experience it more than others, but everybody has it to some degree. And another way of saying trauma is just incomplete experience. It's incomplete emotional experience. It's emotions that were on the way up in the wave, in the life cycle, got stuck because we didn't have enough strength to lift that weight, and they spun out and they kept spinning out, and we kind of froze. So the way of looking at trauma that I've found to be most useful is like money frozen in a bank account. There's all of this energy and information that's stored in our system, but it's frozen. It's money we don't have access to. We know it's there. It can be felt as like physical discomfort, like if you have constant tightness in an area of your stomach or within your chest, your solar plexus, or in your neck. It can be felt, as just like a chronic undercurrent of anxiety. It can be felt in many different ways, but all of that is just a symptom of like there's a whole bunch of energy, like a big amount of energy, more than we were capable of processing at the time, that's locked up. And if we can get access to it, then we get access to all of that energy and the energy that was repressing it in our system. So it's like unfreezing the bank account, and now you've got capital. In that same way, it's like trauma is a spiritual opportunity. And a lot of this work, it's a whole retreat or at least a few sessions to get into how to deal with trauma. But the main thing to say here is that regardless of what the trauma is, there are a lot more solutions to it than you think. And Bruce loved to tell this story about did we tell the story of the woman in the garden?
Yes.
I don't think so. We said it at a retreat. Was it the one that was like tortured? I can't remember right now.
Yeah,
I think she was like raped or something.
Yeah. So the short version of it was that Bruce was complaining to his teacher one day about all the pain he was in, like emotionally. And his teacher sent him to a garden to meet an old student of his. So he gets there, meets a woman, and she starts taking off her clothes. And Bruce is like, what's going on? Am I about to get laid?
Of course you.
And he's looking at this woman, and she has what he described as like the strongest internal light that he'd ever seen. It was like, angelic. But as she takes off her clothes, there's just scars all over her body, like from head to toe. And as the story goes, she was sort of the, what's the word? Not a princess, but like the equivalent of a, what?
Like beauty pageant.
Yeah, I don't know what the equivalent was back in those days, but we'll call her a princess, She was sort of the crown jewel of the town that she was in when Emperor Mao and their army came through the town and brought her into the town square. And I apologize, this is dark, but basically took turns like beating and raping her in front of the whole town. So that's about as bad of a trauma as I can kind of imagine going through, She's just a shell of herself when she finds her way to Bruce's teacher, Liu, and he taught her inner dissolving. And so over the years and through that practice and working with him, she not only resolved that trauma, but became what I can kind of assume was like a stage turquoise individual, super, super highly developed. And I would even wager a guess to say that the energy, the collective energy of that trauma, if you imagine all of that being locked in her system, as it was dissolved and reintegrated, that's the energy that fueled that inner light that he was seeing. So paradoxically, it's the most painful experiences that actually give us the energy to grow into what we're meant to become. And I'll say just really quickly, we don't have too much more, so we're almost there. But the way Ricardo puts this is the pain is the medicine. It's like our pain history, our trauma history, that is the energy that fuels our development. This morning we spoke about discontent and uncomfortable emotions, even trauma, as fuel for intent. That's available in all of us. And the teachers that I've worked with that made it to the highest level are those that had the most trauma. Like Bruce shattered his spine and pelvis and was going to die in the hospital, and he rebuilt his physical body through internal practice. You know, he went through all kinds of stuff, almost dying in India. And in the same way, like Muhammad Ali's father was allegedly drunk and physically violent. He became the greatest boxer of all time. Michael Jordan's father was verbally abusive. Kobe was like socially outcast in Italy. We know all these stories, but that trauma energy fueled their greatness ultimately. So those sorts of acts of greatness and development are their ways of dealing with the trauma. There are a whole bunch of methods that we could talk about here, like not in depth, but as places to explore if you want to. This won't be like a trauma counseling session or anything, but somatic therapy, which Jackson was just speaking about earlier, somatic experiencing. There's a book called Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine. Yeah, you read it? Yeah. Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine goes into this in depth. There's psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, which is being studied at Johns Hopkins University and has shown like a ton of benefit with really complex trauma. There's traditional psychotherapy, Hakomi therapy.
What was that?
Hakomi therapy, which Reggie Ray practiced.
How do you spell that?
Hakomi, just like it sounds, it's like Hakomi, I believe. I could be off on that, but I think that's right. And just good old-fashioned traditional meditation. Not always, like in the sense of just sitting down and counting your breaths is not going to do it, but the inner dissolving that we speak about is sort of like the water wearing over rock. And trauma is very rarely reconciled all at once. So if there's a big stored trauma in the system, more often it's dissolved in bits and pieces. So when we sit down and practice in the morning and an emotion comes up, the body has this sort of intuitive intelligence, this perfect intelligence to give us as much of it as we can handle. And that's the water wearing over rock, slowly but surely. You know, the relationship that ended in heartbreak that we didn't process fully 5 years ago, or the time that our parents yelled at us when we were 5, or the like heartbreaking loss during the basketball game, or the trauma we had from our coach, or some much more severe things that can happen to us, you know, and do happen to many, many people. Those things come up in bits and pieces in sitting practice, and through the same method of just experiencing them. That's it. Not getting up into the head, not repressing or avoiding, just relaxing into them. It can be dissolved, and slowly the body becomes purified.